Good evening, everyone. This is Brown at I Have Brown, and belated Merry Christmas and Happy Holiday to all of you. Tonight, we're going to be talking about Sharky's Machine on DVD. Sharky's Machine came out in 1981, and it was based on the 1978 novel of the same name written by William Diehl. And Burt Reynolds not only starred in this movie, but he directed it as well. And it came along at a rather interesting point in his career, because up until this point, he was mainly known for comedic work in films such as Smokey and the Bandit, The Longest Yard, White Lightning, Gator, Hooper, all fun movies. But every now and then he showed he could do some dramatic work as well. I mean, most famously in, say, John Borman's backwoods horror classic, Deliverance. You see that movie once, you don't forget it. But even in the prison football comedy classic, The Longest Yard, Burt Reynolds showed that he could do serious as well as funny and basically find a balance between the two. And so when the time came for his involvement in what would end up being Sharky's Machine, he was wanting to step away from comedy, or at the very least rely less on comedy and venture forth more into the realm of drama to try his luck as a serious actor and flex his acting chops or acting muscles. And a friend of his sent him a copy of William Diehl's novel, and he fell in love with it. And one of the reasons that Burt Reynolds liked it so much was because it reminded him of his favorite movie, which was a 1944 film noir piece called Laura. And that's something I still need to see. But with that in mind, Burt Reynolds agreed to star in the movie, but he wanted his former Deliverance director, John Borman, to do the movie. Unfortunately, though, John Borman was already working on the fantasy movie Excalibur at this point in time. And so, since he was already busy with Excalibur, which is a good movie, by the way, he recommended that Burt Reynolds take a shot at directing Sharky's Machine himself. So he did. And what we end up getting is a very well done crime drama with more than a little film noir thrown in for good measure. And Burt Reynolds in interviews had oftentimes described Sharky's Machine as Dirty Harry Goes to Atlanta. And it's a pretty apt description, but the film's not devoid of comedy, but it's definitely more on the side of serious, because it has this, gritty portrayal of, the seamy side of police procedural and the crime that they deal with. And it also, has Burt Reynolds giving one of his, grittiest performances of his career, and it's one of his most raw performances as well. And I honestly wish that Burt Reynolds had done more work like this, because not only did he show that he had what it took to be a serious actor, but he also showed that he had what it took to direct. Because working from a screenplay by Gerald de Pego, and with a crew of talented people both in front of the camera and behind the camera, Burt Reynolds definitely put together something good here, and I really wish that he had done more work like this. So with that in mind, let's go ahead and get into it. So Sharky's Machine starts off with the character of Sharky, as played by Burt Reynolds, who is a narcotics detective currently working in an undercover case. But unfortunately, said undercover case goes off the rails real quickly. And so there's a bit of a body count involved, one of which is unfortunately a civilian. And due to said civilian getting killed, due in part to Sharky's cop antics, Sharky's demoted from Narcotics to Vice. And so he initially sees it as drudgery, because a lot of people in the police department regard Vice as a joke, right? But he actually comes to form a good bit of camaraderie with the people working in Vice, and even sees some familiar faces. And so before long, he actually becomes friends with a lot of the people working there, and they form basically their own clique, so to speak. And so even though most people in the police department regard Vice as a joke, they take their work rather seriously. I mean, at the same time, though, they're not afraid to have some fun. But one of the cases that, or one of the things that Sharky is working on is investigating this high-profile prostitution ring. And one of the women that he's focusing on is a prostitute named Domino, as played by Rachel Ward. And so Domino, turns out, is uh, connected to this prominent family values politician who's basically, wanting, he's offering to, leave his wife, for Domino. And he's even, saying that he's got a house, set up just for her, and the two of them could have their own love nest and everything. And so, with this in mind, Domino herself, sees this as an opportunity to get out of, the life. Like, she sees, the opportunity to be, a kept woman, someone who's constantly provided for by a rich guy, because she doesn't necessarily want to be a prostitute. Like, she, wants to be, say, a professional dancer, but for various reasons, she ended up, going to the realm of prostitution. And Sharky, as he's investigating, Domino, he and some of the people from the Vice Squad, they basically set up this surveillance equipment in her apartment, to basically spy on her, to see who else she's connected to. Because there's also been some high-profile prostitution killings, in a sense that these high-end prostitutes have been killed with, prominent people, both in, I guess you could say, the political community as well as the criminal community. And so, with, Domino being confirmed as a part of this, that's why they're focusing on her. But Sharky actually comes to, form kind of an obsession, over Domino, and a bit of, something of a romantic attachment to her, even though he's never actually met her. But, he kind of gets to, know her through spying on her and her day-to-day life and what have you. But when Domino makes it known that she wants to, get out of the life, she is visited by notorious Atlanta crime lord Victor, who's a gentleman who's got his hands in, just about every pie: prostitution, drugs, homicide. I mean, you name it, he's a part of it. And Victor, it turns out, actually knows Domino from way back, and he's actually the one who got her into prostitution, as it turns out. And so when he finds out that Domino is wanting to, get out of the life, he agrees to, basically, give her a free pass and see to it that, no one, gives her any trouble, but on the condition that, Domino services him one last time. And so she reluctantly does so. But when Sharky sees this, I mean, he kind of becomes disillusioned with, Domino, because, I mean, here he is forming, his own, ideas about her, in his head, fantasies and everything. And then, when he sees, harsh reality, it's kind of like, why did he even fall for her in the first place, especially when he's never even met her. But it turns out, see, that Victor isn't quite so keen on, just letting Domino go. In fact, he sends his brother, a deranged, drug-addicted assassin named Billy Score, as played by Henry Silva, to kill Domino. Because, see, it turns out that Domino, because of her involvement in this high-end prostitution ring, is privy to certain information that has gone between the politician that she's wanting to, leave with, as well as Victor. And she'd basically be able to, whether willingly or not, act as a connection between, Victor and the politician, and basically, reveal their ties to the authorities, like their criminal activities and what have you. And so, once, Victor has his last tango with Domino, he has his, crazed brother, Billy Score, kill her. And it turns out that Billy Score, on Victor's orders, has been the one who's been, bumping off, these high-end prostitutes and their connected clients, as it were. And so he horrifically murders Domino by way of a shotgun blast to the face, through her front door at her apartment. And so when this happens, I mean, the Vice Squad comes running, to try and catch the guy, but Score just vanishes. I mean, he's basically like a ghost, right? And so not only is he psychotic, but he's also stealthy. So a very scary combination. But they were able to get some information, from having kept Domino under surveillance. But with her killed, basically there's a certain amount that they're not going to be able to do in terms of, say, following up on leads and what have you, or continuing to develop the case, as it were. And so Sharky, one day soon after, goes to Domino's apartment, just to kind of, I guess, get a feel for her and, say maybe, see her one last time, so to speak, even though she's dead. I mean, maybe he just wants to say goodbye, but it turns out, see, that wasn't Domino who was murdered by Billy Score. It was actually her roommate. And, because of, her roommate getting shot in the face with a shotgun, and basically, her roommate, not necessarily, having her name on the lease. I mean, everyone's thinking that Domino is the one who was killed. And so when Sharky, sees, Domino walk in to her apartment, as he's, basically saying his, mental farewells to her, he's basically kind of stunned, and she's kind of bewildered too. She's like, what the hell are you doing in my place? And so he tells her, what's going on, and that, and basically that she's supposed to be dead, and she's like, what are you talking about? And he's like, they were gunning for you, but they killed someone else instead. And he tells her it was her roommate, and who was also one of her best friends. And so, naturally, Domino is more than a little devastated by this. And, Sharky, basically, takes her under his, wing to, get her away from the scene, because, he realizes that if, Victor, finds out that, she's still alive, he's going to have either, his brother, Billy Score, try again, or he's going to use his connections in the criminal underworld and possibly even in the police department to try and kill her as well. And sure enough, once Sharky, gets Domino, under, his protection, and, lets, certain members of his squad in on what's going on, it turns out that, they're being kept under surveillance as well, by certain, people, both in the criminal underworld as well as within their own police department, as in, people above them who are connected with Victor, who, don't want, Domino to basically spill her guts about, what she knows about the criminal activities of Victor and, the prominent politician that, she's seeing, and how the two of them are connected. And so, with that in mind, the hunt is on. And while Sharky and his crew are able to make some headway in terms of, say, trying to find out, what are some of Victor's connections, like what were um, the some of his odds and ends that they could get the drop on, so to speak, or as well as how can we get to the politician, because if he's elected, he's going to be under Victor's thumb. But unfortunately, though, while they're making some headway of their own, they get too close to something that's too hot for them, and well, let's just say that you know through Victor pulling the strings, you know Sharky and his team come under attack, and not everyone makes it out by the end of this picture, unfortunately. So this was a really well done movie and a very good crime drama, and I think that as far as say the story goes, I think it was interesting in the sense of how you know much was going on. I mean, you had what started off as a cowboy cop being demoted and venturing into the realm of police comedy in some ways. I mean, but still on the serious side of things, because this was supposed to be reality, right? But then once Sharky ends up inadvertently getting into something that you know connects him to a big fish, so to speak, he doesn't let go. And but then this big fish turns out to be even more dangerous than he thought. And it's interesting to see him, a character who's very confident in his own skills, as well as the way he's able to work a lead or a hunch or something like that, suddenly finding himself in over his head. And I thought that Burt Reynolds did a good job of playing that kind of character. I mean, someone who was initially assured of himself, but kind of cynical, with the way things are in terms of say the authorities and the police department and red tape and what have you. But at the same time, he is trying to do his job, and he takes his work very seriously. But it was cool seeing Sharky kind of bond with the crew. I mean, because I mean you had some good actors. I mean, you had Brian Keith playing kind of like the mentor figure of the group, a guy named Papa. And Brian Keith, I mean, he's a very jovial old guy, and he has a good sense of humor, and so a very likable character, sort of like the crazy grandpa of the group, if you will. And you had Charles Durning, who plays the captain of the department, of the Vice Squad, a guy named Frisco, who was an old friend of Sharky's. And so it's interesting seeing how he and Sharky have a genuine friendship with one another, but at the same time he's having to remind Sharky that, hey, you gotta follow the rules here. It's like, just because we're friends, it doesn't mean you can have things 100% your way. It's like, I'll bend the rules a little if I have to, but at the end of the day, you gotta follow the rules. So it's interesting seeing that kind of relationship between the two. And he also has his own sense of humor as well, and at times it comes across as a beleaguered bureaucrat. It's like, as the case gets crazier and crazier, he finds himself up to his eyeballs in bureaucracy. But you also have let's see, Bernie Casey, from Revenge of the Nerds and Under Siege, as Arch, who is a fellow detective in the Vice Squad. And I really liked his character because, I mean, Bernie Casey has always been one of those guys who's able to be funny even when he's being serious, and vice versa. And his character was rather interesting because he has conversations about Zen Buddhism, I believe, or maybe it's technically just Zen, but there comes a point where he's talking to one of the characters about an instance where he had to step in on a domestic dispute, and he realized that the husband, who was beating up, the wife, was basically about to kill him, and he just kind of, went elsewhere in his head. Like basically, he just, convinced not only himself that he wasn't there, but he sort of projected this, almost like force field around him, and just mentally in his head, he's thinking all this, and he sees the guy, and he's talking about how he saw the husband, the domestic abuser, the one who was about to kill him after being his wife. Something happened. It's like he saw that he suddenly didn't register to the abuser, and once he got to where he was able to you know get into a better position on the situation, he spoke up, and suddenly it's like this bubble burst, and the domestic abuser was kind of freaked out, like, where the hell did you come from, even though I was just looking at you, and suddenly you're not there, and now you're there again, and so it's interesting, like seeing Bernie Casey play that kind of part, like someone who's that contemplative about I guess mysticism and what have you. And that particular element actually does come into play, later in the movie. I mean, I don't say anything else about that particular moment, but just remember the words, "I'm not here." And so, yeah. But, so yeah, I mean, you have some, good actors, like that. And also, the actor, Earl Holliman, who plays Hodgkins, the corrupt politician, I thought he did a pretty good job too, because I mean, you see, so many, news articles and headlines about, politicians getting in trouble for illicit affairs and things like that, and or various other criminal activities, and because it's like usually if they're involved in one thing, they're involved in something else, and so I thought that. Sorry, I have to take a look here real quick. Earl Holliman basically did a good job of playing that kind of politician, like someone who, like when he's with Domino, I mean, he's someone who's able to let his guard down for just a short amount of time, but he's able to actually relax with her. But whereas outside of being with Domino, like when he's with the public, I mean, he's having to put on a face, pretend that he's a family values guy, and someone who has the city's best interests at heart, when he's really just a pawn for the crime lord Victor, and he has his own agendas too. And so outside of, say, the fake smiles that he puts on for the camera, the only times he seems to, actually be a real person are the brief moments we see of him with Domino, or when he's freaking out and panicking, like breaking out in a cold sweat, as this whole situation spirals even further out of control. And so I know it's fun. It's kind of strange, touching on that particular character and singling out Earl Holliman's performance for that, but just seeing how people in power, you read about certain people in power who, I mean, they're having to pretend, that they're one thing when they're really something else, and they're not really able to just be who they are, unless, with the exception of, some rare moments and what have you. So I thought that Earl Holliman did a good job of showing that kind of pressure, what it would have, the effect it would have on someone like that. And, for the character of Victor, he was played by a gentleman named Vittorio Gassman. I hope I'm saying his name right, but very good actor. I want to say he's Italian, but don't quote me on that. But very good actor. He had a very old world feel to him, and there was a certain charisma to him. Like, he was genuinely charismatic, but then when you saw what he was willing to do in terms of, say, willing to have Domino, a woman that he actually cared for at one point in time. Uh, he was willing to have her brutally murdered just to, sever, a connection, that might, be something the authorities could tag him on. I mean, you definitely see that there's something sinister under the charisma. And, when you see, there's a point where, like, you see him, um, when he's, riding with Hodgkins, the politician, at one point. Um, Hodgkins is initially, chewing him out for having Domino killed because, he was genuinely in love with Domino. But, Victor basically, reminds him of, one, why she had to die, and two, you know, he reminds him that, he wouldn't be where he was as a politician without Victor's involvement. And so he's like, if you want to, break away, go ahead and get out of the car. And basically, just pointing out that it's a long walk, and both, literally and metaphorically speaking. So he's saying, you leave me, then you're on your own, pal. I mean, anything that, I have on you, I might not be able. I might just not be able to keep it from the authorities, if you should break away from things here. And so it's interesting seeing, the dynamic, like that, between, say, politician who's supposed to be a figure of power versus, someone like Victor who actually is a figure of power. And there's even a little moment where he and Sharky, have this little face off at this, high class restaurant. And it's interesting because you see like how everyone, it's like a 5-star restaurant, everyone's dressed to the nines, and Victor's at this table with like 4 or 5, beautiful prostitutes, right? And basically they know, where their bread's buttered, so to speak. But Sharky, Burt Reynolds, so he just strolls in, and he's, dressed, in basically blue collar clothes, sort of ragged looking, right? Because of all the stuff he's been through. But, he basically just has a stare down with Victor, and Victor's keeping his cool and everything. And he's just saying, you're basically an insect. You have nothing on me, and anything you did have on me, well, it's been gotten rid of. And so, it's interesting because it's like you see that a character like that with all this, wealth and, all the women with him and everything. And on the surface, you're like, man, this guy's living the life. But then when you have, Sharky confronting him and what he's, seen Victor do, it's kind of like, yeah, this guy is living the life, but, how many people has he killed and how many lives has he ruined to be able to have all this stuff, And so it was a very, interesting, portrayal of, someone who was a figurehead, in the criminal underworld, and I thought that Vittorio Gassman did a very good job with the character, making him both charismatic and evil at the same time, like repulsively evil. And Rachel Ward as Domino, I thought did a really good job too. And I remember I saw her in the Russell Mulcahy cable miniseries On the Beach, which was also a good piece, and I thought that she was wonderful in that. So seeing her in this movie in a much younger role, or earlier role in a younger role too, Rachel Ward basically brought a certain amount of gravitas to her character, because I mean, the cynic in me kind of wanted to call her a gold digger, in the sense that it's like, a prostitute. I mean, the first, person, sugar daddy, comes along to literally buy her a house. I mean, she's, basically going to, throw everything aside and, latch onto that guy, but then at the same time, though, it's like the more you learn about her character, when you find out, how she got into the world of prostitution, it's kind of like there's more to her than that. Like, she's not, while what she's doing may be considered gold digging in the sense that she's, only seeing high end clients. When you get her backstory and what have you, you understand why she's doing what she's doing, but you also understand that she does want to get out of the life. And like when you see her, like, dancing and, practicing in dance classes and what have you, you see that she's actually alive. She's genuinely happy, as opposed to, say, the false happiness that she's forced to project when she's with a client, that kind of thing. And so it was interesting seeing her have those moments, where she's able to be free and what have you. And like when Sharky, he's, spying on her and, getting to see a glimpse of, the real person, beneath, the sex worker, or underneath this, the veneer of the sex worker. I mean, it's interesting. And Rachel Ward, I thought, did a good job of just, bringing that kind of character to life. And when she and Sharky are having to go on the run together, they have a rather interesting dynamic, because it goes from Domino being a terrified woman, and Sharky being sort of the protective figure of the group. When she realizes that Sharky's been spying on her this whole time, like she finds pictures of her at one of the places that they're at, she's pissed off and beyond livid. And you kind of understand why, because it's like, how would you like it to find out that you've been spied on, and so there's kind of like this love-hate relationship between the two, and because they actually do get to become close with one another. And Sharky kind of opens up to her about some of the stuff that's gone in his life and his history and what have you, and she kind of returns the favor. And so she's not quite thrilled. She's not thrilled at him having spied on her, having become obsessed with her, but at the same time, the two of them actually do connect on a genuine level, though. So it was interesting to see that. I did think that having them become romantically involved, while not, say, completely, out of left field, I did think having them become, romantically involved was something that felt kind of rushed, I guess, because considering the danger of the situation they're in. I mean, I definitely bought them, getting closer, but I think I would have preferred it if, say, there was kind of like this gradual connection being formed between them, and then an attraction, but they don't, say, pursue that attraction or interest in each other, say, until after everything's been resolved, because they're very much under threat of being killed by Victor and whatever connections he has. And so but other than that, though, I thought that Rachel Ward as Domino was a very intriguing character. And it's interesting how she used the skills that she picked up as, say, a dancer, like something that she genuinely loves doing, and she kind of incorporated them into, say, a seduction technique, like when she's, having her last tango with, the crime lord Victor, But another standout for me was Henry Silva as, the, crazed, hitman Billy Score. And so Henry Silva is one of those guys who, most of the stuff I've seen him in, he's been a bad guy. I mean, most famously, or most, like, I guess the two most prominent things I could think of him being in were he was the main bad guy in the Chuck Norris movie Code of Silence, which is actually a good movie, as well as the Steven Seagal movie Above the Law, both movies directed by Andrew Davis. And he was definitely on point as a bad guy in those movies, but he was more subdued, and he was kind of a figure of authority in those movies. But here, though, he is batshit crazy. Pardon my language, but he is. And you see whereas Victor, his older brother, is more restrained and charismatic, and is able to do things. He's able to play the long game. Billy Score is just a time bomb who's exploded multiple times already, and Victor is only keeping him around because, hey, he's family, but at the same time, when like you kind of come to learn that Victor's wanting to get rid of Billy Score, or get rid of his brother Billy, because I mean, while he's not wanting to have him killed or anything like that, he is wanting to break away from him and have him sent away, to do his own thing, because it's like the more people he's killing in a fit of drug induced rage. I mean, the more attention he's drawing to Victor and his operations. And so it's like, I mean, yeah, he's doing these jobs for Victor, like he's killing like these prostitutes and connected clients for Victor, but because of his drug use, he's becoming reckless and he's leaving traces of himself at the crime scenes. And that's kind of why Sharky and his crew, or his machine as it were, are able to find proof of Billy existing in the first place. Because I mean, as played by Henry Silva, I mean, Billy Score is someone who is very spooky, very eerie. Like, there'll be this focused concentration one minute, and then he's literally screaming in your face the next. And so, I mean, a very unstable, character. And I thought that Henry Silva did a good job, playing that. And it was cool, seeing, an actor who's usually so subdued in his, bad guy roles, getting to basically, play for the camera, so to speak, and just go all in on the batshit craziness of his character. And there's even a moment or two where it doesn't quite go into the realm of, say, supernatural horror, but it has a feeling of supernatural horror with some moments with his character, because he's easily able to disappear. Like when someone's going after him, he's able to basically vanish. I mean, even if, say, someone has him in their line of sight and, he goes around a corner and, and this character who's pursuing him, should just be able to go around the same corner and easily catch him, the guy's not there. And you could just say, oh yeah, he just went up the, flight or steps or something like that. But it's like, okay, if the flight of steps is, way over there, and the last time you saw Billy was like right here, and you're that close to him, and suddenly he's gone, yeah, that's pretty spooky. And, at the climax of the movie, I'll just say that it's a very bloody shootout. and Billy Score is involved in it, and as well as, Sharky and what's left of his team. And it's a very brutal, action piece, or it's a brutal action set piece, and it's a lot more bloody than I thought it would be. But you see that sort of borderline supernatural trait of his character, and Henry Silva just does such a good job of playing it, because on one hand you're thinking, okay, he's just on so many drugs that he's just able to move super fast, or something like that. But at the same time you're like, how is he able to just, how is it humanly possible for him to just appear in one spot in 1 minute, and then disappear, and suddenly you're right over there the next. It's like, as certain characters say at that point, this guy's a ghost, and it's pretty spooky. So that was very unexpected. I mean, I knew that, I figured there were going to be some intense moments in this movie. I mean, as gritty as it was, but when it came to having Henry Silva on screen playing this deranged hitman, I mean, I didn't expect there to be like a borderline supernatural element to him, like as far as, say, this horror vibe, So very good job on Henry Silva's part. and unfortunately, I mean, Henry Silva, like many other actors in this movie have since passed away. So, I mean, this will definitely be one of my favorite performances of his. But let's see, anyone else? Yeah, those were the standouts for me as far as like the actors and the characters. And so I really liked seeing the dynamic between Sharky, as played by Burt Reynolds, and the rest of the Vice Squad, his machine, as it were. And one of the other characters I really liked was the character of Nosh, as played by Richard Libertini, and he's kind of the go-to guy for setting up the surveillance equipment. And I liked his character because, I mean, he was one of those, people who was an old friend of Sharky's, but he was basically trying to get out of, the game, so to speak. So it's funny because you have like people on the criminal side of things trying to get out of the game. Then you have people on the police side of things trying to get out of the game. Like he's trying to make a life for, himself and his wife and child, his little girl. And so, but then, Sharky basically kind of calls in a favor with him and challenges him and says, hey, if you don't do the job, then some, wet behind the ears schmuck, from the department's going to do it, and they're going to botch it. I mean, you really want that to happen, that kind of thing. And so, Nosh, basically takes the bait and goes in, but he has a very snarky personality that's right at home with, the rest of the people, in Sharky's machine, so to speak. But he becomes like like everyone else in the group, like he's someone who kind of endears himself to you. And when the stakes get higher, he's one of those people that you come to care about, and you're hoping something bad doesn't happen to him, that kind of thing. So that's the thing I liked about these characters, is that with Sharky and his machine, so to speak, you know they were all endearing in their own ways. And you really, when you saw them working together, I mean, you really saw that there was like a tight cohesion to them. I mean, it kind of made me think of Michael Mann's Heat, when you saw like the criminals, doing their thing, and being like a tight group. And you saw, the police, doing their thing and being a tight group. It was fascinating, watching, these professionals at work. And so, when you watch Sharky's machine and we see, Sharky and his people, working together and, doing their job and, following all these leads and everything, it's really fascinating seeing the machine at work. And also, just like I said, the camaraderie, with all of them is, really well done. It's believable. It feels lived in, like it feels authentic, like the actors really enjoyed working with each other, that kind of thing. And I really liked Burt Reynolds as Sharky. I mean, as I mentioned earlier, this is probably one of his grittiest performances, and like you see, there's like a lot of there's cynicism, there's some dark humor, but there's also a lot of pathos to his character as well. And one of the things I liked about him was that, I mean, he was a badass, like he could handle himself in a fight for the most part, and in a shootout too, but he wasn't invincible. And there's a couple of times in this movie where he gets his ass handed to him. And there's a scene, sort of around the third act where the shits hit the fan, so to speak. And he finds himself in a boat at night, way out on the water, like away from, the city. Being interrogated, and let's just say a knife is involved, and more than a little blood is spilled, it's like I figured Sharky was going to get hurt, but the what they do to him on the boat, I mean, I was kind of like, oh damn, and it's like you don't expect for. I mean, sure, you kind of expect your protagonist in a crime drama to be roughed up here and there, but I'm surprised that they went as far as they did with how they tortured him, because here he is, he's supposed to be the badass, lead character in the movie, and yeah, I mean, he's in a very helpless position, and, the way they torture him, I mean, it's like, it's more gruesome than I thought it would be. But I'll just leave it at that. But yeah, I mean, like I said, points for having a protagonist who's definitely a tough guy, but he's not invincible. Like he's very human. He can be hurt, and so that definitely just made it to where, you know, the danger felt more real because as the stakes get higher, um, and Victor's able to exert his power, and have various people in the underworld or the police department, um, basically work against Sharky and his people. Um, and you see certain people that we've come to like get killed. I mean, you already figure, okay, it's a crime drama, it's a cop movie. Someone in the police department, one of the good guys is going to get killed, surely, right? Well, I'm surprised that they went with the body count that they did, and the fact that they went out of their way to make the characters, likable and believable, kind of made the danger feel more authentic. But when you see Sharky getting, beat up like he was and tortured like he was, that just elevates it to where you're like, you know, you're on the edge of your seat in that regard. So, um, but yeah, I think that just all in all, like I really liked the gritty approach that they took. I mean, the humor in the movie, like it felt real, like it didn't feel forced or anything like that. It felt like hey, these are cops who are working together, and they know each other, and so they joke around and things like that. And so when you have like the character like Bernie Casey's character Arch, talking about Zen Buddhism and stuff like that. I mean, it doesn't feel out of left field. In fact, it just feels like something that further enlivens the characters. But yeah, I mean, you really come to like these guys, and and so when they're in danger and under attack and what have you, I mean, you care about what happens. And also I just it was interesting, seeing kind of like the dark side of urban life at the time, like the, prostitution and what have you. And it's funny how, like, initially it's kind of, there's some lighthearted banter about prostitution, but then when you find out, about, Victor's activities, like how he got Domino involved in prostitution and what have you, you come to realize that, prostitution, isn't as cute as, some people make it out to be. Like there's a very dark side to it. So I like that the movie touched on you know things like, say, the drug trade and prostitution and political corruption and things like that, and people that are supposed to be in power, you know are instead working for someone else and things like that. So it was a very fascinating, multi-layered, film as far as a crime drama goes. And so um, like the only thing I could really think of that was a problem with the movie is the aforementioned bit of having Sharky and Domino be romantically involved so quickly. I mean, it's not like, say, the it's not like, say, the one of those moments in the Terminator where Kyle Reese and Sarah Connor, they've been on the run together for a short time, and then they fall in love, do the deed, and what have you. Like that felt more organic, something like that did. Whereas here, though, it just it feels very abrupt. Like as far as them being romantically involved, like I liked them getting to know each other and gradually getting closer. But I just think that it would have been more believable if, say, their romantic involvement would have been, say, saved for, you know, after everything's calmed down. Like if they survive the, whole situation and what have you, if they're able to, stop Victor, or something like that. Like if, it's like save the love, the lovebird stuff for after that, that kind of thing. But I mean, other than that, though, I mean, I thought that this was a really cool movie. And I would actually give this one, let's see, I want to say, 5 stars, but I'm going to give it 4 stars out of 5. I mean, nothing. I mean, it's still a good movie though. But I guess now that I'm thinking about it, I will say that the complexity, while it does make the movie stand out and it makes the movie more interesting than some other movies of its ilk, I do think at times the complexity, they make it too complex for its own good. Like there's a lot of plot threads to keep track of, like say, the involvement of certain characters and certain, certain crimes and things like that. And there were a couple moments where I actually had to, kind of rewind the movie just to, you know, listen again to some of the dialogue and put certain pieces together. So it does feel, more a little too complex at times. In some ways, the complexity works. In others, I feel like they could have maybe simplified a few things. I mean, not dumb it down, but just make it to where it's like, okay, there's not as much to keep track of, but just enough to keep it to where it's like, okay, this is a complex case, but not like, say, your head's going to explode trying to, keep an eye on everything, that kind of thing. But, and I guess one other thing would be just that, since this was made in the early 80s, I mean, it's inevitably going to be dated, like in terms of, say, like, how people, dress and how they, talk and everything. I mean, I didn't have a problem with it, but other people might. Like, might be all like, this movie's so dated or something like that. But it's like, I mean, you put that aside. I mean, that's how people acted back then. That's how people looked. That's how people talked. So, but yeah, I'm going to go ahead and give Sharky's Machine 4 out of 5 stars. This was a good movie. And as far as the DVD goes, it's basically a bare bones DVD. And, yeah, I don't even know if it has a trailer. I don't remember for sure, but as far as like anything extra, it's like nothing really, which is a bummer because considering that this was Burt Reynolds major effort to, I guess, put himself out more in the realm of, say, dramatic acting, and he was trying to create a serious crime drama, and this was something that he clearly put a lot of blood, sweat, and energy into. I mean, I would have liked to have seen some kind of documentary on it, like whether it was a retrospective documentary or something that they did at the time. I mean, or it would have been cool to have seen something where like Burt Reynolds, like back when he was still alive, but after the movie was made, looking back and talking about it. I mean, I would have liked to have seen that, or maybe say other people who like were familiar with William Diehl's novel that the movie came from. I mean, maybe have them talk about things. I mean, and some of the other actors, it would have been cool to get their feedback on things, especially like Rachel Ward, because this was kind of like a breakthrough role for her, I think. Like it wasn't her first movie, but it was one of them. But it was definitely something that kind of put her on the map. And there's a reason that Burt Reynolds chose her for the part. But yeah, just I mean, it's a good movie, but unfortunately this particular release is bare bones. So I don't know if they've got a Blu-ray for it, or if they do, I don't know if there's any bonus material that's of any consequence. But yeah, if you want a good gritty crime drama though, Sharky's Machine is definitely worth checking out. And if you're a Burt Reynolds fan, definitely check it out. It's one of his best. So thank you very much for taking the time to check out my review. And you got any questions, comments, drop a line, let me know. And if you like what you see here, feel free to like and subscribe. So thanks for listening. Y'all take care. Bye.